Member Columbia River, Revelstoke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. And through you to the Minister, thank you, Minister, for the opportunity, and obviously your staff as well. I'm just going to kind of carry on from where my colleague just left, because it's a very similar. I represent Columbia River Revelstoke, which is classified as a remote rural riding. And there's two centres in that riding that have been impacted by the new contractual agreements that have been signed by this government. And those are, of course, Revelstoke and Golden. Revelstoke has a population of about 8,500 people, according to Stats Canada, but a recent TELUS poll, which is probably more accurate, Madam Chair, than the Stats Canada has it anywhere between 13,000 and 14,000 people. Because of it's a tourism location in Revelstoke, a lot of people living in places where nobody really knows. So the population is large, and as I say, and then Golden's around 6,000 people. So fairly significant rural communities, boxed in by the Rocky Mountains and the Selkirk Mountains, as we all know, and the Rogers Pass, and my colleague mentioned winter driving conditions and so on and so forth. So one of the things that has happened with this new contractual agreement in both Revelstoke and in Golden is, through you, Chair, to the Minister, as he would be well aware, is the fact that they've been cut from 5 days a week to 3 days a week. This has had a disastrous impact on the level of service that they're providing, especially in Revelstoke, with the increased population and the population that really isn't even on the radar. So knowing that, and knowing that other communities, and I'll get to that in just a second, but knowing other communities in rural British Columbia, I use Merritt as an example. From what I understand, Merritt is about the same size as Revelstoke, yet it's still retained the 5 days a week. So my question to the Minister was, how did the Ministry decide that Revelstoke and Golden should both have reduction of their operating hours by at least 16 hours per week, which is basically the 5 days to the 3 days?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So the way that the numbers get set, and again, these are based on the bids. So the bids are made by the proponents, and they bid what they believe is needed to meet the client need in a given area. And we set some minimums in those areas based on the numbers of people in labor market and what the expectation is as to how many people are in a community. So in those communities, they bid for the 24 and 24. Now what happens moving forward, and their assertion in the bid says that they will be able to meet all the need with the 24 hours in those two communities on the week. We also, though, have an annual evaluation of service delivery, and I'd spoken earlier to your. I don't believe you were here at that time, member, but speaking to your colleague about the performance measures that are in place and the evaluations that are in place moving forward about delivery and service levels and what the expectations are about service levels. So we will evaluate on an annual basis whether the number of hours of service are in fact meeting community need. And if not, then there'll be a assessment of the need to increase those hours, and that will be a discussion with the successful proponent, with the service provider, and we'll be looking for evaluations, and we'll be talking to people in the community, obviously, as well as looking at the data in terms of labor market data to determine what that looks like.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and through to the Minister. I appreciate that answer. So if the proponent, just so that I'm clear on this, so if the proponent is the one that made the application based upon the knowledge that they had and the service levels that they thought were required, was there any oversight by government when those decisions were made in terms of making sure they didn't get it wrong? Because through the Chair to the Minister, they got it wrong on this one, because Revelstoke is underserved right now. So obviously that process, was there an oversight here, and how are those criteria, how did that decision even be made then, based upon just what they had asked or they had proposed in their RFP?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's an evaluation. The criteria that's set It looked very closely at previous service levels, and our data is good enough that we know how many people are coming through the door, because it was a fee-for-service structure, so everybody who's coming through the door, there was billings coming forward for those folks from the previous model, so we had that information and labor market information. So we set the base criteria. In this case, it was the 24 hours based on the information that we had. And as I had said to the member previously, there was an ongoing evaluation there, and we have the ability, and we certainly will look at on an annual basis at what's happening there. And as I'd mentioned, and again, I know that the member was busy with other responsibilities at the time, we require also the annual business plan from the service provider, and we need to approve those annual business plans, and they will obviously look at a whole array of issues, including operational time.
Member.
Through to we beat you to it. Through to the minister. That's good news around the business plan. I'm all about business plans. So around the evaluation process, then I know that the folks in Revelstoke are struggling with this right now. Golden's kind of figured it out a little bit better, but the Revelstoke population, as I say, is above what Stats Canada. So that reduction has really brought them into a situation where it's desperate. They just don't have the resources to deal with the numbers that are coming through. So in terms of that evaluation process, which is great to see that it's there, is there a way for a city like Revelstoke to apply or to approach the ministry and say, listen, we can't wait a year? Is there an opportunity for that to happen? Because waiting a year is not going to help them in what they need to do now. So that would be my question. Is there a process that we could look at in terms of applying to the ministry or talking with the ministry to say, this isn't working, here's why?
Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Chair. So to the member, when we had talked about the evaluation process also, there's monthly monitoring going on of every centre by my officials. We'll be waiting for the first monthly tracking, which will be coming since we commenced this in April. But I'm also, and I'll have the executive team will be up in your part of the country in the early fall. But before that, what I'm happy to do is certainly to take those first the monthly monitoring and have my folks have a conversation with the service provider to see whether they have any issues or what their thinking is about this, and I'd be happy to get additional information from the member that can come, and we'll get that to my staff, and I'm happy to have folks have a conversation, and if we identify a problem there that we'll work on how to correct that, whether it's and I don't know what that looks like. We're early into the process. We do have the monthly monitoring. We have, as I had said, we have regular, we have contract agents in all communities all over the province who deal directly with the service providers on an ongoing basis. And we're happy to make sure that we're having a conversation, and if that conversation should include the concerns that the member has raised, then we'll have a discussion about that and keep an eye on that.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you through to the minister. I appreciate that offer, and we'll definitely take you up on that. I understand that these offices are driven by statistics, just like a conservation officer I'm fighting for in Revelstoke too. So all driven by statistics. But I'm just curious, through you, Chair, to the minister, during the consultation and the RFP process, were Mayor and Council of Revelstoke or Golden ever approached for their opinions in terms of how this process went?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Directly, no, I don't believe there was that was part of the process. You'll know there was an evaluation process. Service providers were evaluated. There was two processes here. One was the requests for qualifications to qualify potential applicants who might be a bit, and then those up to 4 in any given catchment area were qualified, and then they were allowed to make a bid. And that qualification included a series of evaluations. We evaluated whether those organizations, their contractual relationships with government previously, whether it was as an employment service provider or other kinds of contracts, as many of these organizations do other kinds of work as well. So that was evaluated internally with government. We also reached out to stakeholders and to others in the community who had worked on the employment and services side to get evaluations there to qualify. And then once we had qualified organizations in a given region, then the process went forward. But I don't believe that there was a direct interaction with the Mayor and Council.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and to the Minister, through you to the Minister. I appreciate that. My suggestion, it certainly is not my role to tell you your business, but local government needs to be consulted. So in any of those, towards the end of it, I would hope that we consider in the future to engage local municipal governments, their mayors and councils, in decisions that directly impact their communities. And I think that's critical, and I know they would appreciate that. So we'll move from that. I just want to talk a little bit about funds for training that were associated with the WorkBC offices. Through you to Chair, to the Minister, previous to April 1st, 2019, individuals were able to walk in the door and obtain a varying degrees of financial assistance for direct employment training, whether they were on EI or not. I know that I've been working with, through my offices, one gentleman who was laid off, did not go on to EI, but did find a potential job as a flagger, which requires a 2-day training course through either Selkirk College or College of the Rockies, whatever institution, which $275. In the old system, he would have been able to have that money through the office and have that training. And then he spoke after April the 1st, and they told him that was no longer eligible for the immediate STOC funding, and he would have to submit a request through the Minister for approval. So he was also told that STOC courses are now limited to WMIS, Food Safe, Serving It Right, Basic Computer, World Horse, and Emergency First Aid. So I guess the question that I have through Chair to the Minister, I'm wondering why those courses were chosen over others, because now this individual unfortunately has to wait, and the job opportunity that he could have had that training, pretty much the week after he got laid off, but now he's got no job and no training. So I'm wondering why the courses like the Flagger courses were taken from that. The ability of the local office to make that decision, and now it's become a centralized decision.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank the member for the question, because we're hearing the same thing. We're hearing there was an adjustment. The course is still available, the Flaggers, but it's in another place, so to speak. And what we've heard is that this may not have been one of those good ideas. So there's an evaluation going on now about a rethink about how we fold those courses in, and the concern that the member has raised. This is not the first time, and what I would say is it needs correction, and we know it, and we're working on it.
Member.
Chair, through to the Minister, thank you for that answer. That's an honest answer, and I appreciate that. I really do, because I know that there are individuals in that community that will also appreciate it. So that's great news. My final question, and this may have already been canvassed, I was in estimates as well, but a number of nonprofit organizations were the WorkBC contract holders in our province, and you may have already answered, Minister, this question. Can you give me the numbers of how many contracts are still held by the nonprofit versus the profits?
Through the Chair, please, Member. Thank you.
Through the Chair, of course.
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So there are now 47 contracts in total when you include the 2 provincial contracts that are held or the provincial contracts that are held around apprenticeship services and assistive technologies. 26 of those contracts are held by nonprofits. 3 of them are held by a public institution, 3 distinct contracts held by Douglas College, which provides apprenticeship services. 18 of them are private companies. And to give you an idea of the value of that, under the previous program, 49% of the dollars went to private companies, 49% of the dollars went to public or to nonprofits. Under the current model, 57% goes to nonprofits, 39% goes to private companies, and 4% goes to public institutions.
Member.
Through the chair, thank you very much, and thank you for that information. That's very helpful. And I know that I'm organizing through you, Chair, to the Minister, a meeting with the Minister of Environment with the Mayor of Revelstoke, so we'll try and take you up on your offer, sir, and have a meeting when he's here as well and talk a little bit more and bring some more data to your attention for that. So with that, I thank you very much for the opportunity through the chair.